explode. I shut my eyes and my mouth and my legs just gave out. Why in the world would you hit me when I'm down? 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 I get lost in and out when you walk in and out. Turn my hair in and out. I get stomped in the ground. I'm down, but I'm down. I get lost in and out when you walk in and out. Turn my hair in and out. I get stomped in the ground. I'm down, but I'm down. When I'm down, but I'm down. My head blows up when I'm alone. Inside out, I might explode. I shut my eyes and my mouth and my legs just gave out. Why in the world would you hit me when I'm down? 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 I'm down if you're down, there's no way around it. I'm down if you're down, there's no way around it. When I'm down, when I'm down, when I'm down, when I'm down.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gematrinator live stream. Today is April 28th, 2019. The topic of this video today will be yesterday's incident at Shabbat Synagogue of Poway, where we're told that a shooting occurred, leaving 1 dead and 3 injured, the latest in a string of anti-Semitic attacks. Most notably, we had the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, or a suburb of Pittsburgh, back in October. So, this video is going to be pretty interesting. We're going to cover a small range of topics here, not just this story, but a little bit more about what I've been doing lately and the direction of the blog and this channel and all that good stuff. So thanks to everybody who's jumping in, whether you're watching this stream live or archived. Thanks to everybody who's jumping in and contributing in the chat. What's up to Bobby there, one of the mods on this channel. And yeah, let's talk about the language of Gematria, numerology, and how this all is incorporated into yesterday's event. All right. So we're actually going to start off with a story that was published on CNN in March. And before I get too deep into this, if you have any comments or questions for me, I will be checking out the chat later on after I get through this story. Once we start looking at a couple more topics. I'm going to turn my volume up here a little bit. It's very frequently that people complain about low volume, so I'm going to set this mixer up a little higher for you. Now, in the description for this video below, you'll find a link to my blog post on a very bizarre pie tribute that CNN gave to Jim Varney, who played the character Ernest P. Worrell. Also, I made a video on that, which, you know, I usually wouldn't make a video on something like this because the news story itself wasn't very interesting. It was just about a man who was in a hospital and he was told that he was likely to die by a video link robot instead of an actual live doctor entering the room. It was a very strange story, and I felt compelled to make a video about it because it was so out there. And sure enough, often when the media does this, they're cluing us in on a future event. Sometimes I wonder whether or not the editor of the story is really aware of it, but I think they are. And in this case, we found what this was pointing to, and it was actually yesterday's shooting at the synagogue, in which the shooter's name was John T. Ernest. So we'll talk about how not only the name, but the numerology all lines up with this story. And this story regarding a man named Ernest Quintana from last month, who was told he was going to die by a video link robot. And the first thing that stuck out to me was how the name Ernest Quintana, in the language of Gematria, which I'm assuming you're familiar with at this point if you're watching my videos, a very simple practice of coding numbers into words using the standard alphabetic order and the rules of numerology. The name Ernest Quintana sums to 178 using the alphabetic order and 200 with the alphabetic order reversed. The reason this is so interesting is because this is the same two numbers that show up in the Gematria of Ernest P. Worrell, the character played by Jim Varney, famous from, films from the 80s and 90s. Ernest P. Worrell sums to 178 in the reverse order and 200 in English ordinal. Additionally, what's so interesting about these two numbers is that Ernest P. Worrell, whose name sums to 200, died in the year 2000. Meanwhile, Ernest Quintana, whose name sums to 178 in ordinal, passed away at the age of 78. CNN didn't tell us what day this man passed away on, but they did publish the article on Sunday, March 10th. March 10th was the 69th day of the year, as it is on the Gregorian calendar every year in non-leap years. In Satanic Gematria, the name Ernest P. Worrell does have this value of 690, like 69. 69, a number associated with sacrifice. In Hebrew, sacrifice summing to 347, the 69th prime number. And if you measure from the death of Jim Varney, this actor, to the date that this article was published, it was a span of exactly 6,969 days. In Jewish Gematria, the word pi equals 69. Jim Varney passed away on February 10th of 2000. So if we measure from that date to the date of this article, here's your 6969. This is also exactly 19 years and 1 month. This here representing the number 191. And in the alphabetic order, the name James Albert Varney summing to 191. So this was very clearly published in relation to his death. We'll talk about these numbers in a second because these numbers I talked about last month also appear in yesterday's shooting ritual. Very interesting stuff. Also, the man in this article, Ernest Quintana, had a daughter named Annalesia Wilharm, whose name matches James Albert Varney in reverse. Now, James Albert Varney was known more commonly as Jim Varney. In the alphabetic order, Jim Varney equals 117. This article about Ernest Quintana was published 1 month, 17 days before yesterday's shooting, which fell on the 117th day of the year. So before diving deeper into the Ernest riddle, let's talk about why the city of Poway, California, was chosen for this numeric ritual. If you look up Poway on Wikipedia, and we'll get right back to the Illuminati here in a minute, as this ritual was not just aligned with the death of Jim Varney, but also the Bavarian Illuminati. Anyway, Poway. Now, I'm very consistent in this. Anytime something takes place in a town or a village or even a state, we look at the numerology of the establishment, the incorporation date of the city in this case. The town of Poway was incorporated on December 12th, 1980. If you measure from the date that this town was incorporated to the date of yesterday's shooting, you get exactly 2,002 weeks and 1 day. Now, in numerology, these zeros are virtually meaningless in the result. So here we're talking about the number 221. In the alphabetic order, the phrase synagogue shooting sums to 221. Now again, this is the second shooting at a synagogue in the last 6 months, the previous one occurring in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And what stuck out to me is that Pittsburgh was incorporated as a city on March 18th of 1816, meaning that on the date of that shooting, the city was 202 years old. So while Poway was 2,002 weeks old, Pittsburgh was 202 years old, both representing the number 22. You may also notice that Pittsburgh was 223 days after its anniversary. This number sticks out because the Synagogue of Satan, the rulers of end times in the Revelation, the final book of the Bible, has this gematria of 223. The state of California was admitted to the Union on September 9th of 1850. If you measure from that date to the date of their synagogue shooting, look at this. California was 2,023 months old. But we let off talking about the number 221, as appears in the value of synagogue shooting, 221. In this same alphabetic ordinal cipher, the most significant one to the study, I believe, of course, that could be contended, the Bavarian Illuminati has this value of 221. And I want to talk about the witness that they chose for this article. When you go to CNN's story that they published yesterday, this is not the article. This is today's article regarding the woman who was killed. But CNN only had this 39-second video where they chatted with this witness really briefly. And this witness's name was Christopher Foltz. Using the reverse alphabetic order, his name sums to 221 as well. We also have a 211 in the alphabetic order. The word Mason equals 211. Of course, 211 is the 47th prime number, and there's 47 degrees on Freemasonry's compass on their emblem. So, the theory is that these shooting incidents are not only false flags, but could very well be complete hoaxes, which are orchestrated through willing participants in Freemasonry. And that's not to say that all Masons are in on this, but there very well could be a level of Freemasonry where, people have to take part in these types of rituals in order to ascend in the ranks. Now, what I also want to point out about the name Christopher Foltz is that it has a single reduction value of 103, thus representing the number 13. The Bavarian Illuminati, which shares Gematria with Chris Foltz, was founded with 13 families. And look at the number they give you in CNN's banner. Notice how they quote the mayor. Now, think about this. Why wouldn't they quote the police chief? Why wouldn't they refer to the authorities, the actual people investigating the incident? Why is it the mayor? The mayor says 1 was killed and 3 were injured. This again showing us the number 13. Well, the reason is because the mayor, Steve Voss, if you look at this article I linked in my blog post, you'll find that he was sworn in as mayor on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018. If you measure from the date that this man was sworn in as mayor to the date of the shooting, it was exactly 130 days. Again, the number 13. That's why the mayor is being quoted and not the police chief. Now, if you're familiar with my work, you may know that 13, due to its relation with the Illuminati, is the primary ritual or hoax code. This event occurring on the 117th day of the year is very interesting because when you write out the number 13 as it's spelled, it sums to 117 in the reverse alphabetic order. We mentioned how this shooting is 1 month, 17 days after Ernest's pie tribute that I picked up on back on March 10th. The name Jim Varney 117. In the alphabetic order, 13 sums to 99. The Bavarian Illuminati, which was established on May 1st, 1776, a very real organization, a secret society that was truly established. This is not a conspiracy theory. If you add 5 plus 1 plus 17 plus 76, you get 99. Founded with 13 families on a date with numerology matching the Gematria of 13. The news referred to this synagogue as Shabbat of Poway Synagogue. In both reduction and reverse reduction, this synagogue has Gematria of 99. It all falls together so damn perfectly. Now, another thing I commonly talk about, something I would have definitely addressed by now in most of my videos, is the solar eclipse code. When we talk about numerology and how these events align with one another, we find that total solar eclipses and the dates on which they occur are used as a marker of time. And think about how total eclipse equals 47 in reduction, like how Freemasonry's emblem is set to 47. The compass on the emblem, the compass used to draw the circle, 47. During a total eclipse, you look up in the sky and see the circle. The word time equals 47 in the alphabetic order. So a total eclipse used as the ultimate marker of time, and it's a rare event. Total solar eclipses only occur on average about 7 times per decade. If you measure from the synagogue shooting to the next total solar eclipse, you get a span of 67 days. In reduction, the phrase total solar eclipse equals 67. In ordinal, notice the 202. And that's interesting because 22 is the number that we saw appear in the age of both Pittsburgh and Poway on the dates of their respective synagogue shootings. 67 also the value of blood and human sacrifice, which are always aligned with total solar eclipses. Now, something that's worth pointing out about the city of Poway. Poway is in San Diego County and is technically a suburb of San Diego. Exactly 67 days before the shooting, the San Diego Padres signed slugger Manny Machado to the biggest contract in American sports history at the time. The name Manny equals 67. Also known as Machado equals 117. The Padres play on the 117th meridian, this shooting on the 117th day of the year. The world of sports, depressingly enough, is definitely aligned with all these false flag events we see in the mainstream media. To further the connection between 67 and this shooting, we're not only going to look at the mayor of Poway, which we already touched on, but we're also going to look at the mayor of San Diego. This man here, Kevin Faulconer. Notice how he was born in the year 67. And the reason he's in office is because he was reelected on the date June 7th, or 6/7. Notice how the name Kevin equals 74. He's the mayor of San Diego, which equals 74 in ordinal. This brings us to the name of the shooter. We're told his name was John T. Ernest. And what do you know? John T. Ernest, in reverse reduction, sums to 67. This brings us to our next most significant number. 67 is a prime number. That would be the 19th prime number. Of course, prime numbers of very significant importance to this study. In the same cipher that this man's name equals 67, the town of Poway equals 19, just like how 67 is the 19th prime number. And the shooter is said to be 19 years old. By the way, it's also been a little over 19 years since Ernest passed away. Jim Varney, the man who played Ernest, died in 2000, over 19 years ago. The name of this synagogue was Shabbat, which equals 19 in our three most significant ciphers, ordinal, reduction, and Jewish or Latin. The mayor of Poway, which sums to 19, his name is Steve Voss, which sums to 109, which is a lot like the number 19 in the reverse alphabetic order. October's synagogue shooting occurred on a date with 19 numerology. Here we are in the year 19. Chaos equals 19. We'll touch on the chaos code in a minute. But first, I want to mention this. If you multiply 19 times 19, you get 361. This shooting falls 361 days after the anniversary of the Bavarian Illuminati. And they're calling it a hate crime, which in English Gematria equals 361. But touching back on all these 19s, 1,919 is the Gematria of 1,331. And 1331, as I commonly document, is the ultimate solar eclipse number. This post, you can look this one up. It's called Huge 1331 Discovery. And it talks about the big solar eclipse of 1331 and how important it is. Well, in English Gematria, the town of Poway equals 1331. October's synagogue shooting also fell on a date with full numerology of 75. The word order equals 75. New World Order equals 75 in reduction. order out of chaos equals 75 in reduction as well. In ordinal, order out of chaos sums to 183. Yesterday's synagogue shooting was a span of exactly 183 days after the most recent synagogue shooting. All right, so we've talked about a lot of numbers. To the seasoned numerologists who follow my channel, I probably haven't lost you too much. You know, this might not be the video for someone new to numerology. Well, maybe it is. I don't know, but something definitely very strange is going on here. But now let's talk more about how this character, Ernest P. Worrell, ties back into this story. In my post last month, I mentioned how the name Ernest, using square numbers, and this square number cipher is considered a base cipher in Hebrew, which is a language where Gematria originated alongside Greek isopsephy. See how the name Ernest, like the character from the movies, has Gematria of 1331 in both squares and reverse squares. This cipher, based on English ordinal, simply multiplies every number by itself. And I noticed this in my post. You know, the total solar eclipse of the year 1331 seems to be very, very significant. It's the only total solar eclipse I've ever seen whose path of totality never touched a major body of water. Notice how the entire path crosses land. Please, if you can find another total solar eclipse with this characteristic, please let me know about it on my Discord. My Discord can be accessed by simply visiting gematrinator.com, going to the miscellaneous, and clicking the Discord chat link. But to my knowledge, this is the only one we know about. 1331 eclipse equals 1331 in Jewish gematria. It was on the date November 30th, which is the only date on the calendar that sums to 1331 in this cipher. This number is very important. Think about how it's made up of the numbers 133, which sums to 1331. Also, 331, which has the same letters, sums to 1331. So this number is super important. And if you go backwards from the date Jim Varney, who played Ernest, if you go backwards and measure from that date to the date of the 1331 total solar eclipse, you would get 8,018 months and 10 days, because November only has 30 days. And look at the alphabetic order. Ernest equals 81 and 81 in reverse. So even then I noticed how this was aligned with that eclipse. And this article was a span of exactly 81 weeks after the most recent total solar eclipse. This brings us back to yesterday's shooting. Remember, the shooter's name was Ernest. And yeah, he did spell his name with an A, but it's obvious what's going on. It's still the name Ernest. Ernest summing to 1331, just like Poway, the ultimate solar eclipse number. We talked about the mayor of San Diego, which Poway is a suburb of. His name is Kevin Lee Falconer. His name equals 178. That's the same as Ernest P. Worrell in reverse, 178. And if you measure from the date that this man took office as mayor, back on March 3rd of 2014 to the date of the shooting, look at this, it's 1,881 days. Ernest summing to 81 and 81. Isn't this some bizarre shit? And to wrap this up, there's a couple more interesting things I want to talk about. Now, these shootings were at synagogues. And, of course, synagogues are places of worship for Jews. Now, there's a Jewish day of mourning called Tisha B'Av. And if you don't know this part of the riddle, this is so important. And no, this isn't to incriminate Jews. This is to incriminate those who are using the numerology of the Jewish faith for their own personal agendas. In Jewish Gematria, Tisha B'Av sums to 9/11. And this is extremely interesting because Tisha B'Av is the holiday that remembers the fall of the two towers, which both occurred on the same date, several years apart. 9/11 here in the United States in 2001 was the date that we lost the Twin Towers in New York City. And now we have two synagogue shootings, right? Sort of like representative of the two towers. Now, if you measure from the date that Jim Varney died to the date of yesterday's shooting, you get a span of exactly 19 years and 11 weeks. So we do have a 9/11 here. But really, this 1911 number is so important. Ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, who, again, at the high levels, is helping orchestrate these bizarre, ridiculous rituals. This has Gematria of 1911. The name of the shooter in this story, John T. Ernest, equals 1119 in that same Jewish cipher. The 9/11 attacks in 2001, the symbolic destruction of the two towers, was 191 months and 10 days before the Great American Total Solar Eclipse. So here again, we have that 1911 number. And it's my conspiracy theory, so to speak, that the high levels of Freemasonry had everything to do with the collapse of the Twin Towers. And of course, such an event would be aligned with solar eclipses. And just think about it. The Twin Towers forming the number 11, like two ones. They were in New York, the 11th state. The first plane that struck the towers was American Airlines, like AA-11, and it was Flight 11. The name Jesus equals 11, and in the Gospels, Jesus was crucified during a solar eclipse, or an event that was interpreted to be one by many historians. The last thing I'll point out, Tisha B'Av, which sums to 9/11 in Jewish, also has this value of 134 in the reverse alphabetic order. The mayor of Poway, Steve Voss, also has this 134 as well. So it's a very complex spiderweb, so to speak, of various numbers, all of which have a lot of significance. And, you know, if you're new to this work, you may be thinking that, yeah, you can do anything with numbers. You have all these different ciphers. You're measuring all these different dates. But mind you, these are all numbers that I talk about regularly, or at least most of these are. You know, the 9/11, the 1911, 1331, 1967. All of these are so significant to this occult that's feeding us our mainstream media. And, you know, it's my belief that the mainstream media currently, as we see it now, is the evolution of the MK Ultra mind control program that the government has confessed to so many years ago. So jumping back into the chat here, Again, I want to be very clear. We're talking about synagogues and Jews a lot. The vast, vast majority of Jewish people are not aware of how they're being manipulated in such a way. You see, the agenda that's being put forth by the elites is primarily one of division. In fact, the word division equals 9/11 in Jewish Gematria. And there's a couple other things that stand out from the Gematria of division, 101 and 115. This shooting was considered a Passover shooting, 101 and 115. The last synagogue shooting was at Tree of Life, which has that 101. Like the 11. So, for us to take this information that I'm sharing and turn it against Jews is exactly what the elites would want us to do. The more hate crimes that occur, the more excuses they have to clamp down on things like free speech. So by no means should anyone be interpreting this as being anti-Jewish. Me personally, in fact, I have family, uncles and aunts who are Jewish. A little bit about my backstory for those who don't know. I never met my grandfather on my mom's side, and neither did my mom. He was a Jewish man who got my grandma pregnant and then ran away to the East Coast. When he lived on the East Coast, he met a Jewish woman, had a family, and, that was entirely separate from my family. It wasn't until about 10, 12 years ago that my mom really began taking the search for her father seriously. She came to find out he died at the age of 58 and had 4 children, all of whom were, highly educated. They all do very well. In fact, my mom just went to my cousin's wedding in Manhattan. And I guess, they dropped a whole lot of money on that wedding. But the point is that, just because those people are well off doesn't mean that they're an enemy or that they're, I won't get too deep into it, okay? I don't really have a full understanding of it. But, again, these people's faith are being manipulated. And I urge against people being strictly anti-Jewish. What someone else said in the chat previously is that Zionism is the cancer of the earth. And to me, that's a little bit more accurate. There is a belief within certain people who claim to be Jewish that it's their duty to bring about the second coming of Christ, or the first coming of the Messiah, in their case. Me personally, I consider myself a follower of the teachings of Jesus Christ, and a lot of people have issue with that, people who follow my work included. A lot of people who are very intellectual and logical have a hard time believing that Jesus could have been a real person. They see his whole life as an astrotheological riddle, which I do agree with. However, keep in mind that we are all individually different astrological riddles ourselves. In previous videos, I've shown how the astrology at my birth was so interesting. The sun was at the middle of the bullhorns in Taurus. The moon was at the tip of the spear of Sagittarius. On my birthday, the sun was at the 74th degree of the ecliptic, the sun being the innermost celestial object in the heliocentric model. Saturn, the outermost planet that we can see in that same model, was at the 233rd degree of the ecliptic. In Jewish Gematria, Gematria equals 233, and in ordinal it sums to 74. Gematria also sums to 142. My name, my first and last name, equals 142. So to me, astronomy is part of reality. And for those of you who point to the fact that Jesus is an astrotheological riddle and that's why he's not real, I believe I can make the argument that he is very real because of that same thing. Now, because astronomy kind of completes this whole riddle of letters and numbers and whatnot, from what I can see. And just look at my name, right? The name Derek, summing to 43, 92, 29. Numbers, 43, 29, 92. My last name, summing to 99 and 90, which is the same as letters, 99 and 90. And then my name itself, 142, just like Gematria. And I discovered all of this after I began teaching Gematria on my channel. And just ask yourself, what are the odds of that? They're not very high unless you understand what we're living in. And again, I don't believe in Jesus because it makes sense, because it's logical that God would send his son to die on the cross, but because of my experiences. When I was 16, I felt like I had no real direction or understanding of the world, and when given the opportunity to ask for spiritual fulfillment through Jesus, I received it in the form of a physical sensation that is indescribable to anybody who has not experienced it. So, I got into this spiel because I was talking about how the ultimate agenda here from the elites is the agenda of division. And recently, you may have noticed that my blog for the month of April has been almost naked in comparison to the previous 15 months. I was averaging somewhere around 2.5, 3 posts a day for the majority of that time. 2019, it started to slow down, and now this month it really, really slowed down to the point where, I took a couple weeks break. I'm not doing any more than 1 post a day. And why would this be? Well, when I think about, like I said, the agenda being a divisive one, it recently occurred to me how that agenda has essentially worked on me, right? I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of ready to move on and contribute in different ways, and what occurred to me yesterday especially is that I don't think I'm ever going to totally stop doing this work. I feel like the things that I've helped share and discover and bring to light are very unique, and I don't necessarily see it as my duty, but I see my life as being very blessed, and I want to share these blessings with others. This language of numerology, as I've discovered, has brought me closer to God. And it's my belief that the secret societies who already have some understanding of this are actively hiding it, suppressing it, trying to keep the public away from it. I believe that is based in evil, and I want to bring to light what we're sharing. So I don't know, like I said, that I'll ever be stopping the work entirely, but it is going to slow down, and it has slowed down. And again, talking about division, well, since discovering this language of numerology, I've never found myself more divided with the loved ones in my life. And prior to discovering numerology, I was already kind of in a different boat. Like, back in 2004, someone pointed me to an Alex Jones documentary. Of course, Alex Jones, a complete shill. No one should trust this man, but he used to share a lot of interesting knowledge. And through that, I discovered something was up with 9/11. There was some sort of conspiracy involved there. And I always knew that, but I never understood the extent to which the conspiracy was continuing in today's mainstream media. And I'd say, most people I'm familiar with also agreed that something strange was up with 9/11. But once I discovered numerology, well, let me take a step back. Back in 2015, right around the age of 30, I started to really question what I was seeing on the news, because I knew that there were conspiracies with 9/11 and keeping us in wars and whatnot, but I never extended that to the daily news, right? I still believed what I saw on TV and presented, but there was something about the Charleston shooting that really triggered my search for truth. And so, after investigating that, I saw that people still thought Sandy Hook was a hoax. And at that point, I thought, okay, this is ridiculous, right? I need to investigate this and show that Sandy Hook happened, mainly to ease my own mind, but to show these crazy conspiracy theorists that they were nuts. Well, I never found any evidence that Sandy Hook occurred. So, at this point, I'm already falling out of sync with my loved ones, right? I was in a relationship at the time. I tried talking to my family about this. They weren't really having any of it. Well, after discovering numerology, now I had an extra reason to believe that I was right. And it made me feel like everyone else was even more foolish than I already thought they were. And over the years, this kind of continued and snowballed. And now it's at the point where I don't feel like I have anything in common with most of the people in my life, including my family. I'm going to turn my volume up so I don't have to feel like I have to speak so loud. It's getting to my throat today. But, I was very close with my brothers, for instance. I have 3 half-brothers, all of whom are much older than me. And, I've lost a lot of those relationships for the most part. We don't watch sports anymore together. That was pretty much the primary one. Same thing with my dad. My dad doesn't buy into this stuff. I don't think he has any understanding of what I'm talking about and simply rejects it and thinks it's nuts. So my point is that if the agenda is to divide us, that agenda has been very effective on myself. And I think it's time for me to take a little bit of a step back, and I've found that not knowing the numerology... Sorry about my throat. Not knowing all the numerological details about all these events has helped me not be so fiery about my beliefs, and it's allowed me to a little bit, have a little bit more of a reconnection with people. And I think the next stage of my life needs to be in that direction because, I'm 33 years old now. I'll be turning 34 in June. And what's really occurred to me is that not just the agenda of division, but also the agenda that's here to break up the family. And we know that there's something about population control going on. It's not about killing people, but it's about keeping people from reproducing. And, there's an attack on the family, there's an attack on marriage, and, being my age and still single, I realize that's also part of the agenda that's been effective on me. And I'm kind of leaning towards having a family in the long run. I'm not in any rush to do so, but that's definitely where I'm headed, I believe. And, long story short, I think it's better for me to just kind of have this as a part of my life, not the overall encompassing. I don't know how to phrase it, guys, but Timekeeper Osceola, thanks for jumping in. You have 7 children. You can give me a few. That's funny. Yeah. It's just it's a conflict right now because you look at the world and you look at all the evil out there, and it's hard to imagine bringing someone into it and having them fight through it. But they would also have a parent who is able to enlighten them and arm them with the knowledge necessary to get through it. So there's just been a lot on my mind in that regard. And, yeah, it might be time to kind of move forward a little bit. Just jumping back through the chat here. I've been asked a lot about the Kentucky Derby. I don't. What it really comes down to for me is like I think I could find a riddle if I really looked, but I take almost no enjoyment in looking at prospective events in the future in sports. I don't care really what's going on. Sometimes I find something interesting that I want to decode after the fact. But for me to sit here and spend hours of my day digging through numbers and trying to make predictions, I don't care about that. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't interest me. A lot of people ask me about it, and, really it's just not how I enjoy spending my time. So one unknown fact about me that some of you might not know is that, oh man, I forgot to mention this during my decode. They mentioned the name of the woman who died in the shooting yesterday. Her name was Lori K. I guess I'll just point out that Lori K equals 120 and 48. That's the same as Illuminati, 120 and 48. And, my post talked about this being an Illuminati ritual from the get-go, so you have that. Anyway, what I was getting at is, well, maybe this is better for a different video. I think I'm going to wrap this video up instead. As far as the London Marathon goes, I did a post about a week or so ago, talking about how this whole thing with Nipsey Hussle had a clear connection to the London Marathon. He was dating a woman named London. He ran a clothing store named Marathon. In no way do I believe that this is pointing at a false flag at the London Marathon, guys. That would be way too obvious of a riddle. The reason it's being attributed is because of how well this year's London Marathon lines up with total solar eclipses. So check out my post on that. That's all I think it is, honestly. Also has to do with the death of Nipsey Russell, the comedian. So, yeah. A couple of other interesting blog posts I had recently. We had the death of actress and model Stephanie Shirk. This was cut and dry, as close you can get to the Eclipse Crucifixion Code. It has a lot to do with her husband at the time. So feel free to check that post out. And not to jump around too much, but yeah, look, guys, if you're out there and you want to bet on sports, if you want to use this knowledge to gain some, a few extra bucks or whatever, go for it. I'm all in support of it. Use their knowledge against them. Me personally, like I said, I consider myself to be blessed, and I don't need money from these people. I have a pretty good job that I don't hate. It allows me to contribute in a helpful way to society and help those out in need. So if you have the time to do so, absolutely go ahead and decode those things and make some money. That's great. Me personally, I just feel like it's kind of a waste of my time. I just feel like I have better things to do. And that's not to degrade anybody who's doing it to make money. Go for it, If I didn't have a job, I would definitely be looking at sports betting to some extent. I know people who make a lot of money off of it, people who don't work and make enough money to live off of it, and that's fine. I don't see it as degenerative or anything like that. If anything, it's turning the system back on itself. So, you guys are not in the wrong for doing so. Don't listen to those who tell you that betting is a sin or anything like that. I don't necessarily believe that. All right, guys. I think that'll do it for this live stream. Thanks to everybody who jumped in and contributed. You know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, etc. YouTube's search algorithm doesn't like my videos, doesn't like my content, so it's going to squash it as much as possible. So if there's someone in your life who you feel might be open-minded and is in a little need of a wake-up call as far as the truth about our reality and our mainstream media, feel free to show them my videos. That's why they're here. A lot of people don't like talking about this. They feel crazy rattling off numbers. Of course, you feel a little bit crazy at first, but, I'm okay with that role. One last thing I'll leave you guys with before I wrap this video up. Because, again, when I got into numerology, I got into it because I thought that there was a major conspiracy, and I still believe that there is a large conspiratorial element to it. However, it also led me to synchromysticism, which has thus brought me closer to God, or close back to God again, as I was when I was younger, before my intellectual brain thought that I was being foolish. And, there's this movie, The Number 23, right? And we know there's this riddle with Jim Carrey. Not only was he in this film, where he literally teaches the language of Gematria to people, but he was also in a Batman movie playing the Riddler, where he used Gematria as a riddle. And you see this in Hollywood often, people used in similar roles across different movies, spanning multiple decades at times. And the numerology of this film, just and how it relates to my life, completely blows me away. Because I understand that a lot of people, they see my videos or they look at what I'm doing and sharing, and they think of this guy. They think of some psychopath murderer who's just off his rocker and blah, blah, blah. Well, what's so incredible about this is if you take my name as it appears on my birth certificate and apply it to the alphabetic order, you get the number 203. And this represents the number 23, of course, in numerology. My birthday was June 4th, 1985. 6 plus 4 plus 8 plus 5 equals 23. My work centers significantly around total solar eclipses. Well, if you measure from my birthday to the next total solar eclipse to occur after I was born, you get exactly 23 weeks. And if you measure from the release of this film to my 23rd birthday, you get a span of 66 weeks and 6 days. So, of course, no, this film wasn't released on my 23rd birthday, but there's a pretty significant number that I talk about all the time in numerology appearing right there. And, what I believe my work has kind of revealed is that we're living in some sort of matrix. And again, Hollywood gave us a film named The Matrix to kind of clue us into this part of our reality. And notice the 1331 riddle in the release of this film. It came out on a date with 133 numerology. Remember 133 equals 1331? That ultimate solar eclipse number that I talk about so frequently? And the date it came out was March 31st, or 331. 331 equals 1331, right? Well, if you measure from my birthday to the release of this film, look how old I was. 13 years and 301 days old. And it seems like every single movie that has to do with numerology or matrix or questioning reality, there's always something to do with it, right? I have some sort of connection to all of these. And sorry if I've gone over this before and you've seen this, but there's also this movie Pi. This movie is about a man who creates some sort of program that decodes the Torah. This film also talks about Gematria. And he creates this computer that analyzes the Gematria and discovers this 216-letter name of God. The actor who plays that character is named Sean Gillette. His name equals 141 and 183. Gematrinator, 141 and 183. This is the name of my calculator, right? And look at his birthday. June 4th. Look at my birthday. June 4th. Notice how he was born in the year 68. My full name in reverse sums to 337, which is the 68th prime number. And of course, using square numbers, pi equals 337. And then to make it even weirder, birthday in Jewish Gematria equals 604, which is our birthday, right? Now, let me take this even another step further, because I believe these types of synchronicities are with everybody, not just me. Maybe they're a little stronger with me because I created this calculator. I don't know. But when I was born, the next song to become number 1 on the charts was this song. Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears. And oddly enough, when back in the 90s when I was a kid, Tears for Fears was actually like my favorite band, or one of them. And it's kind of weird, right? It was an 80s band. I was a 90s kid. I did a lip sync in 8th grade for drama class, and I chose Shout by Tears for Fears, which was on the same album as Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Well, then I got older, and you know, for whatever reason, several years ago, I looked back to see what song was number 1 on the charts when I was born. And for that next week, it was this song, a Tears for Fears song. I thought, wow, that's crazy. And then you look at the lyrics of this song, the opening line of the song is "Welcome to your life." And I thought that was pretty weird, right? So already I'm like, there's something weird going on about this world. Well, also consider that Tears for Fears, you know, once I discovered Gematria, then I started to look at this. Tears for Fears equals 61 and 83. My name, Derek Takori, equals 61 and 83. The name of the song has this very incredible alignment you very rarely see, where Jewish Gematria and English Extended both have the same value, 4399. So this is rare right here. But what's so incredible about this is that these two numbers are my name. The name Derek equals 43. The name Tikori equals 99. So, you know, for me to come out and call everything that we're seeing a conspiracy is completely ignorant of the fact that I believe we're living in some hyper-realistic, ultra-advanced simulation of sorts that is designed for us to grow and learn about love. That's my theory anyway. And it seems like no matter where I look, I get more and more evidence supporting that. So, I don't know. You know, people can look at this and say it means nothing to them. But to me, it just blows my freaking mind. Like, I don't know what to make of it. I think there was one other thing I was going to share in regarding to organic numerology that I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, it's just bizarre stuff. And, I encourage everyone to learn their own numbers and just keep an eye out. This isn't about trying to find connections between your numbers and everything you enjoy in life, but just understand what your numbers are and pay attention to your life and the numbers in your life. We talked about this 337. When I built the calculator at the job that I have, I was sitting in cubicle A3037. My first property tax bill on my first house was $3,037. If you measure from my birthday to the youngest of my 3 older brothers' birthdays, he was born 3,307 days before me. Also, the date leaving 230 days in the year, another 23, but whatever. You could go in circles all day with this stuff. And, it's like trying to dig to the other side of the earth sometimes when you look at numerology. I feel like that, and I still stand by all my work and all the connections I've revealed over time. But I also recognize at this point that you can kind of spin yourself dizzy with this. And ultimately, there comes a point where you just have to live the life that's coded for you and enjoy what's here and try to enlighten others and try to help others along. But not everybody will believe or see this language, and they're probably not meant to, The way this world operates is that we are all carrying out a purpose. Some of those people's purpose are to work their jobs and, help their family and provide for their families. Other people have different roles. I think part of my role is to share this language, to advance what I discovered through people like Zach Hubbard. When I first reached out to Zach, it was regarding the organic matrix. I wanted to share with him my experiences, how I asked for a sign, and that day someone died by the numbers very close to my family. And, not everybody who follows his work is going to follow mine. I've actually upset some people by claiming that a lot of the things we've decoded, the people who are dying, they're not all getting murdered by the numbers. They're not. It's not like that. Some of these people who are dying at age 90, in their 80s or 90s, they are dying naturally, but they're dying naturally by a code. And yes, I do believe that some people are getting murdered. But I think probably most of them aren't. And that's just my belief based on my observations. You don't have to agree with me. You can call me a shill because I'm trying to tell people it's not a conspiracy, but I'm just being honest through what I've discovered and what I think is the truth. So, and regarding the M on my hat, no, I'm not a Mason. I'll never take a blood oath. I'll never go through one of those rituals because I see those as of a dark origin, so to speak. But yeah, not only do I live in Milwaukee, right, which is the origin of this M, this being the old Milwaukee Bears logo, an old baseball team that used to play here in the Negro Leagues. But when you look at my name gematria, out of all the numbers that appear in the base 6 ciphers, right, these are the same 6 ciphers I teach in all my videos. When you look at my numbers, there's only 2 numbers here that can be reduced to a letter, or 1 through 26. You have 23 and 13. Everything else is above 26. Well, the letter M is the 13th letter, and if you were to turn the letter M upside down, you get a W, which is the 23rd letter. So, me walking around with an M on my hat, not necessarily a fan of the Milwaukee Brewers anymore. I'd still like to see him win a World Series, but I don't really give a shit anymore. Really, it's just a nod to my numbers. It's kind of my little wink at those who know what I'm really all about. All right, so with that, I'm actually going to sign off for real this time. And yeah, thanks to everybody who jumped in. I hope all of you have a very blessed week. Please enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'll be sitting here in Milwaukee watching the snow melt. Yeah, that's right. 5 weeks into spring, we got a nice little snowfall yesterday. Why? Because, I don't know. The weather gods hate us. All right. Peace, love, and God bless. Thanks, everybody. Adios.